Dear Dr. Joe, you will never believe what happened to me.
Tell me. I never get tired of hearing these stories.
I will tell you, but firstly, it's great to see you again and warmly welcome back to the podcast.
Oh, thank you so much for having me.
So, what I wanted to start with today is the topic of change. I know that's a topic you know a lot about. So my first question to you is, why do we have the need to procrastinate when we know that the change is what is doing the work for us?
Well, I think it's two reasons. First reason is change is inconvenient. It's very inconvenient to break, number two, so many hardwired beliefs that we have about ourselves, habits that we live by every day, and to overcome some emotions that keep us in the past. So the programs that we have by thinking the same way, acting the same way, feeling the same way, really become part of our biology. And all of that is the familiar, all of that is the known. So it's quite convenient to say, I'm going to change tomorrow, or I'm going to change in the new year, or I'm just going to finish this and then I'll change. And I think when we say that, we'll do it tomorrow, we're in a program. And so I believe that now is the new later. Like, if not now, when? And that's what this work is about. That's why we run the week-long retreats, because it's really an opportunity for people to retreat from their lives and to remove the constant stimulation in their external environment that reminds them of who they think they are as a personality, how they think, how they act, and how they feel in their life on a regular basis. Because on a more probable than not basis, it's the environment that's controlling how they're feeling, how they're thinking, how they're acting. So the retreating is a process where people can get acquainted and familiar with knowledge and information again, and remind them that they actually do create their life, and that they have to start thinking differently, that they have to start acting differently, they have to start feeling differently, and give them the tools during that week to challenge them when they come up against, I can't, I don't believe I can heal, it's too hard, I'm not a good meditator, I'm a failure, whatever that thought is that's running behind the scenes of their awareness. Now's the time to take care of that. Because on the other side of that thought is their freedom. On the other side of that thought is the unknown. So stepping from the known to the unknown, there is a biological, there's a neurological, there's a chemical, there's a hormonal, there's a genetic death of the old self. And so many people would rather cling to their unhappiness than take a chance in possibilities. So I want people to come up against their habits, even how they speak, and how they're programmed automatically to get up and do certain things. I want them to sit there and watch their body get agitated, get frustrated, want to get up and move. And instead of quitting and giving up on themselves, which becomes a habit, is to sit in the fire. And that is the time to do it. And if you give people the tools, the formula of something to do when they're caught in that situation, in just a few days, they'll figure it out. If they did not come up against that emotion or that habit or that belief, they would still be the same person. So our belief in ourselves has to be earned. It must be earned. We must overcome to become, and that's 95%. So to say it's to do it tomorrow is very convenient because you can be comfortable. The moment you decide to change, you have to make a different choice, and that's uncomfortable. But if you're not changing, you're still choosing. You're just choosing the familiar.
And that also brings me to another one of your quotes. Where you place your attention is where you place your energy. And if all of your attention is in the present moment, you've got a lot of energy to create with. So my question is, I often find myself daydreaming. I'm already there in my intended future. How does that align with being here, now, in the present moment?
Well, that's exactly the process of creation. When you imagine a scenario in your mind, you have to change brainwave patterns in order to do that. You have to go from that state of, alertness that keeps us connected to our bodies, our environment, and time, beta, the brain has to slow down in frequency and move into an alpha state. And in an alpha state, you get super creative. The brain sees in pictures, the brain sees in images. And the frontal lobe actually turns on the creative center of the brain, and you're selecting a new possibility in the future, and you're dreaming about being there. And that's exactly the work. But you're being in that future in the present moment. Now, the opposite of that is when we're imagining the worst case scenario in our mind based on what we experienced in the past. So then, in a sense, we're overlaying our past onto our future when we think about what if this will happen because it happened before. Now we're imagining a worst case scenario and we're emotionally embracing it with a familiar emotion of the past. That's reliving the past in your future, and you're not in the present moment, right? So the brain naturally has the ability to dream. It's what we do. But if we're living in stress and we're living in survival, it's not a time to create. It's not a time to dream. So when I say then, in living in the present moment or having your attention in the present moment, it creates an enormous amount of energy in the present moment. Most people are siphoning their energy from the present into the past when they feel an emotion that's connected to the past, and that emotion has a memory that's associated with it. So the moment they start reliving the memory in their mind and feeling the emotion, all of their energy is siphoned into the past out of the present moment. The moment they forecast the worst case scenario in their mind and emotionally embrace it based on the past, the brain as an anticipation machine is actually creating a predictable future. And that's the known as well. So if the familiar past is the known and the predictable future is the known, there's only one place where the unknown exists. And getting people to catch themselves from going unconscious, when your mind wanders to a person or a thing or a chore or a schedule or a place you need to be, the only way we get conscious is by catching ourselves going unconscious. And that's a victory. And if you keep doing that over and over again, you get better at it. And that's what the data shows. And so you can finally relax into the present moment, to relax into the unknown. That goes against thousands of years of how we've been programmed biologically. The survival system in the body is the unknown is a scary, dangerous place. Fear the unknown, run from the unknown. And yet, teaching people how to master the present moment, that sweet spot, is the creative moment.
I must say for myself, I used to be able to do this as a child. I can clearly remember. But then something happened. I was probably too much of this world. And I lost it. And I didn't find it before I found your work. And this reminds me of who I used to be. Like sitting there and just letting my mind wander and dreaming while my eyes are open, like you say.
Yes. Well, I think every child, I think all of us have had that experience. I mean, to enter the kingdom, you have to be a child, right? I mean, so children's brainwaves are, they're not in beta until they're 8 years old or 7, 8, 9, 10, 12 years old. They're more in alpha, and the brain, as I said, is that imaginary state. When we're in beta, the critic in our mind is always talking to us. There's a voice in our head that's telling us what to do, and we listen to that voice as if it's us. But if you can observe that voice, it must mean you can't be it, because if you observe it, who's doing the observing of it? That's consciousness, right? So I think children, in my own experience of working with children or raising 3 of them, is that I wanted to prolong that state, that sense of wonder, that sense of curiosity, the sense of what if. And I do think that, we develop, as we said, these programs and these emotional conditionings and these unconscious beliefs based on pretty much our interaction with the world. And the world is constantly reminding us to be limited in some way or to be in fear in some way or to move out of balance. And so as people get regulated in their nervous system here, as they learn how to quiet down the mechanism and get creative, they will feel more like themselves. In fact, the more coherent their brain gets, the more people say at the end of a week-long retreat, God, I feel more like myself than I've had in a long time. Well, you just you remove the veils, the hypnosis, the conditioning, the blocks that have stopped the flow of the divine in you, and now it's consuming you, and now you start feeling connected to it because you have less separation from it by doing the work.
I will quote Buddha now. He said, "Every morning we are born again. What we do today is what matters most." So my question to you being, what matters the most to you? What is your overarching mission for this lifetime?
Well, I agree with the statement. Not that I'm going to disagree with Buddha, but
That's a good start.
I always think that one day is one lifetime. I think one day you can master some aspect of yourself. And we're all faced with great opportunities in our lives that are brilliantly disguised as impossible situations. And we have to meet that adversity. We have to meet those challenges from some greater level of mind. So if one day was one lifetime and you were astute in the process of evolution, the only way you could evolve in one lifetime is if you were to change. That's change and evolution are synonymous to me. But to change by overcoming some thought in your mind, some habit, how you speak, some emotional reflex that keeps you living in the past and behaving in your past. Someone who is truly a student of life would say, one day, one lifetime, this is who I'm not going to be. I got to stay conscious so I don't go unconscious. And I have to remember and I can't forget. That's the work. Now, breaking a habit requires an enormous amount of awareness, an enormous amount of energy. So I'm not going to be this person. Who do I want to be? Like, who do I want to be today? What do I want to believe? What do I really want to believe? Could I program my brain to believe differently from I can to I can? Or I can't heal to I can heal, or I can't be rich to I can be rich, whatever it is, or abundant. Why don't I keep remembering that thought so I don't forget it? And nerve cells that fire together wire together, okay? So there's a reinvention process going on biologically. The person will ultimately, if they keep doing it, that will be the new voice in their head. They program themselves to think that way. How am I going to be with my coworkers, with my family, with my children, with my friends, with my parents, by myself? Let me rehearse how I'm going to be in that staff meeting. Let me rehearse how I'm going to be when I see that person or when I do this thing. Let me review it in my mind. Remembering what to do, you're going to do it. And you're going to install the hardware. Keep remembering, keep behaving, keep reinventing. It'll be how you act. Okay, here's the hardest part. In one lifetime, one day, can I stay in my heart? Can I stay here and out of this survival state? Can I stay in love? Can I stay in gratitude? Can I stay in appreciation? Can I see the world through this lens, independent of any person, any news flash, any interaction or condition in my outer world? Can I regulate here? And if I lose it, I'm not going to say I failed, because that's a program. I'm going to get back here again. Now, if you were in the game, and that was one lifetime and one day, at the end of your day, you have to ask yourself, and we do this at the end of our lifetime, we review our life. Review your life, review your day. How'd I do? When did I fall from grace? Or what circumstance or condition caused me to shrink back into mediocrity? Well, when did I stop believing? When did I go unconscious and believe something else? Okay, tomorrow, another lifetime, another day. What did I learn about myself, good or bad? What was I able to do well? What did I do well today? Let me remember what I did well so I can do it again. Okay, I got that down. Okay, I got to take that into my new life. I got to take that into my tomorrow. Where did I fall short? What is and this is a good thing, by the way, because I always have it, I think. What am I uncomfortable about? Like, what doesn't feel right for me? Like, my conscience is telling me, come on, you know better. How do you speak? How do you act? How did you do today? What emotion did you fall back into? And what person or circumstance caused you to seamlessly default? Okay, new day tomorrow. I gotta rehearse how I'm gonna be differently in that same circumstance. I actually want the circumstance to happen again because I've built a new way of being around that circumstance. I want the opportunity now to behave differently so I can feel this emotion from this experience instead of this emotion from this experience. Okay, you don't make it the next day, you got another shot the next day.
I love that.
And that's exactly from a cyclical standpoint is what we do. And you can evolve lifetimes in one life if you're truly in the game. Now, for me, I want to be the example of everything that I teach. That to me, I want to demonstrate that in some way. So I'm always going to leave room in my creative process for the unknown, for the unpredictable, the unexpected. That's why if I change, my life should change. If I change my energy, then my life should change in some way. If I'm thinking and feeling differently, I have a different frequency. Let's see if I can maintain it. What about that opportunity or that synchronicity or that coincidence? That's the game. Like, that's the experiment. It worked. And when it works, what do you think you say? I'm going to stop doing it, or am I going to keep doing it? But you're not doing anything. Somehow it's coming to you. I think that everybody innately knows that to be the truth. We just forgot, right? So I'm a very mission-driven person. I want to contribute in some way to people's lives. I think the greatest joy that I have is witnessing human transformation. And people stop me all the time and they say to me, you're not going to believe this, or I got a story, I don't want to bother you because, you probably hear this all the time. I always say, I never, ever get tired of the story because it inspires me to keep doing what I'm doing. And it's not like one person, or two people are having these experiences now. People are healing themselves by the hundreds. Every day we get another story of transformation that's quite unbelievable.
So just to like this is recorded in Cancun, on your stage in Cancun. How many people fit in this room?
We have 2,350 people registered.
I've been here, this is my 4th time coming back to Cancun. I haven't spoken to all 2,350, but quite a few. And it's just like you say, the stories of transformations are too many to be counted, and they are all very original and also unbelievable in many ways. This is not what we read about in the newspapers. And if so, it would be described as something like, what do they call it in medicine? Spontaneous remissions. This is what you see and walk through every day, every week, every lifetime of your life.
Well, I'm so happy that the conversations that I'm having with physicians and scientists actually are not that any longer. There are many, I mean, from religious sects to calling this miracles, to scientific paradigms that are calling it spontaneous remissions. Those conversations have changed dramatically for me in the last few years. And the reason being is that once is an incident. Twice, all right, coincidence. 3, 4, 10, 20, 50, 100, 1,000 times. There must be some law that's provoking these outcomes. So you take the human testimony, and now we're writing case histories on these testimonies because it's unbelievable. And we have to present it to science and have them scrutinize it and have them challenge it and have them be skeptics and try to break it down. We want that. And by the same means, we've been doing such amazing scientific studies. This is our laboratory right here. Yes. This is our human lab. Put everybody in the same environment, subject them to the same information. Teach them how to think differently, how to make different choices, do different things, create different experiences, feel different emotions. Will their biology change? 100%. The majority of people will change in 7 days. We know that to be a fact. So when scientists and researchers and theologians and clergymen and women see the data, it's undeniable. The conversation is completely different. This is no longer pseudoscience, because the best part about it is I'm not saying it. I'm not saying any of this. The data is saying it now. The data is saying it. And now more and more scientists and researchers are saying to me, it's unbelievable. And I keep saying, I know, I can't believe it. I cannot believe it's the truth. So I'm happy to say that when people see the data, it causes them on some level to question what they've been taught. And we've seen so many of the scientists that are part of our research team completely skeptical, doubters, total doubters that are now completely into it. They tell me we have the cure for almost every disease in the freezer. I didn't say that. They're saying that. They're calling this evolution of the species. These are scientists, over 200 published papers, So it's an amazing time, because if you have evidence in scientific research and you have evidence in human testimony, evidence is the voice, right? And so the people that are naysayers, that want to disbelieve, I'm totally fine with that. I don't want to challenge that. But the people who are really curious jump on board and try to disprove it, because our scientists, I've watched them run studies over and over again. Same study, get the same result. Try to break it another way, design another study and try to challenge it, and they get the same result. I know right in that moment they're changing their belief. I know in that moment they're discovering something new, and it's unbelievable.
I'm happy to report that little thing over here, the little black watch. When people ask me, why on earth are you now wearing 2 watches, Rena? I can tell them I'm part of a study in the US.
Yes.
It's a great conversation starter.
Yes.
And then people get curious. And that's also, how many were we in December of 24? I think we were 750 people who signed up for that study, the Quantum 3 study.
Yes, yes.
And it's some of us are still doing it.
The study is ongoing.
It's ongoing.
Why? Because we want to know that when people continue to do the work, they continue to change, or they continue to get better. And my goodness, we have such a large database of information. It's insane. It's so large that we're able to cross-reference different modalities to predict almost to this point whether a person has a disease or doesn't have a disease just by looking at their face. It's insane. It's insane.
So, talking about all of these unbelievable stories, you were recently invited to the Pontifical, did I pronounce that right?
Yes.
Pontifical Academy of Sciences at the Vatican, the only supranational Academy of Sciences in the world. Just on a personal level, how was that? I saw the video, you walking through there. How was that?
Well, the Academy of Sciences at the Vatican is the oldest Academy of Sciences in the world. And what people need to know, I think, mostly about it is it's not based in any religion. It's pure science. And there are many theologians and there's many researchers and even leaders of governments that are interested in the science behind reality. And so I think the number one thing that happened for me was that I saw a lot of goodness in these people. They were genuinely interested in making a difference in the world, and to look to see what my research is saying about miracles. What a wonderful conversation. I talked to cardinals that canonize people for sainthood by studying miracles, and they were fascinated by we played the Source documentary at the Academy on the morning of one day, and then we had an hour-and-a-half conversation with generals and the heads of countries and scientists and theologians and bankers, just about presidents of universities, journalists, very, very broad base of individuals. the conversation that we had after the documentary was really outstanding because, a miracle, according to that model, is something that's unexplainable. So you can imagine the conversation that we had at the dinners and at the lunches, which I thought was the most vital component of it all, because I met the smartest, coolest mathematicians, astrophysicists. It wasn't dinner conversation, it was a great conversation. So the world is changing in a lot of wonderful ways, and I was so happy and overjoyed to see that on some level there are people in the world that really want to contribute and make a difference. And so I made a lot of new friends and learned a ton about what could potentially happen in this world.
I know it's too early, but still, in your wildest imagination, what kind of ripple effects will this meeting, this day, your visit, what ripple effects will that cause?
I think I'll go back. I was invited back more than once. I think that in the next 10 years, I think the language that we're using in this work can become a language that makes different religions contemporary. And just talking to the people that were gathered together, I think that the podcast is going to 900 million Catholics. And I think that the conversation about, we had a conversation about Jesus saying, if I can do these things, you can do them in greater. Like, what did he mean by that? And why isn't anybody doing it then? Why isn't anybody, if he said that, why isn't anybody practicing that? So again, it opened up a lot of conversation. I was talking to doctors and physicians, in a group of people after they played the documentary, asking me about the 8th Energy Center. Like, I just never thought I'd be in the Academy of Sciences talking to, someone in the clergy who's also a physician about the 8th Energy Center. Like, I wasn't expecting that as a question. So I think there's the practical component is essential for people to bring into their lives. Even the concept of prayer, how we pray. Do we pray in lack? In hope and desperation, waiting for it to change, right? Or do we pray in love? And then what is the definition of forgiveness? Like, is it something that you have to intentionally do, or is it just you overcoming the emotion of your past and you no longer have any energy or attention on that person or problem and you feel love? And it's that love then that allows your prayers to be answered. But if you cannot get beyond that emotion, then we're praying from the past, right? So I think there'll be a practical component in the next 5 to 10 years about how what we're doing can help people make it more of a lifestyle thing.
We spoke about this the last time we met as well, but you're so conscious about the words you choose. So is it possible to put into words how this work differs from a religious practice?
I don't know if we have enough time, but I will say this. I think there's a lot of things that are common.
Right.
And I think that there are a lot of things that are different. Now, I've been invited to the Parliament for the World Religions, and I have watched religious scholars and academics argue over words from 5,000 years ago or 2,000 years ago, and nobody knows what those words truly mean because they didn't live during those times, or at least they don't remember if they did. And so science is that contemporary language. I think that's what makes it so inclusive. So I've sat next to priests on a plane. I've sat next to Buddhists on the plane. I've sat next to all kinds of Christians, born-again Christians, Baptists, Catholics, that ask me, what do I do? People who study the Kabbalah, just about every religion.
It's insane in the room. Every religion come here.
And when we get down to the conversation, And or people who see the source, they always say that's what I've learned in my religion. Like okay, so from a theoretical, philosophical standpoint, that's great. But from a practical aspect, are you using it in your life? Are you really using it in your life? Are you demonstrating the divine? Are you showing people what love does? So I think there's a thread of every religion that has a component of what we teach here. In fact, people say, did you study the Course in Miracles? I've never even read one page. I don't even know, anything about that. But I think there's universal truths that we're discovering, not by, at this point, studying other science. We're discovering it from our own science, from our own research. I think what makes our communities so strong, and we have a really strong community, is that we're doers, that people do the work. They're different from other people because they're not going to emotionally default or react the way other people do, because sitting in their meditation and getting beyond the emotion allows them to walk into that new lifetime, that new day, a different person. And you can't do it in the beginning with your eyes open. You got to sit your body still, and you got to come up against those programs and the automatic and autopilot way we live. We got to settle the body down from its emotional agitation and impatience and frustration and judgment. That is the work right there. That's worth more than all the gold in the world, because that's how the person becomes abundant. That's exactly how the person becomes healthy. That's how the person finds love in their life. They're changing right in that moment, and it takes, as I said, an enormous amount of awareness, an enormous amount of energy to do it. But that is the work. That is the work. So I think there's a lot of parallels between truths in religion in what we've discovered here in our own journey.
Thank you for that. Also, speaking of religion, because that can be a very divisive topic, it feels like we today live in a world where we are more divided than ever. In addition to like wars, there are warfares in social media, in mainstream media, alternative media, religion, politics, gender, like you name it, right? Could it be, this is my question, could it be that we as a society are addicted to the chemicals of stress?
100%. But don't forget, living in stress is living in survival. When you're in survival, you're not concerned about anybody else but yourself.
Right.
And because that, you got to preserve yourself and stay alive. So if you present people with information and their reaction to whatever they're exposed to switches on the hormones of stress, whether it's anger or aggression or frustration or judgment or control or competition or hatred or aggression or fear or anxiety or worry or hopelessness, powerlessness, guilt, shame, unworthiness. Any one of those emotions that a person feels when they are exposed to that information is going to divide a community. It's the person's going, when they feel the emotion from whatever information they're exposed to, they're going to accept that information as if it's the truth. When there's an emotional response, they're going to believe that it's the truth. They're going to behave as if it's the truth. They're going to become programmed. So, any way you can create segregation is going to divide communities. Now, I'm not a conspiracy theorist in any measure. I'm a scientist who's interested in studying the effects of human evolution. But from a theoretical standpoint, when people see information that is causing them to get angry or to get fearful or to get sad or suffer, and it divides the community, I think it's easier to control people if you can control their emotions, because if you can control their emotions, you can control their attention. Because the stronger the emotion you feel, the more you pay attention to whatever's causing it. So we discovered, get people together for 7 days, take them out of stress, have them overcome the addiction to those emotions, and it's rehab. And people overdose, and they go on bad trips, and they got a story that goes along with it, and everybody's got a story. But justified or not, valid or not, those hormones of stress in a chronic state where you're feeling them every single day are going to downregulate genes and create disease. That's a fact. So people then, the arousal from the stress response, the survival system creates an alert. There's an emergency, and people get addicted to that rush because it's a rush of adrenaline. And they use the problems and conditions and people in their life to reaffirm their addiction to that emotion. And they become addicted to the life they don't even like. And that's why it's so hard to change. You say to, well, stop hating your enemy. I can't. Well, your hatred is actually signaling genes, right? Overcome your hatred, you take your attention off that person. If you can't and your enemy dies, you'll find another one. You'll just find someone else to hate. That's just how people are. So it's a very high level of responsibility if people accept this to be the truth. Because the only person that's hurting is the person who's feeling that emotion. Because stress is when the brain and body are knocked out of homeostasis. The body's moving out of balance in that state. So the person who's on the journey to heal, truly on the journey to heal and say, I don't want my Parkinson's or my MS or my lupus or my cancer or whatever. What they're saying is, this emotion can't be loving to me. It's not that person, it's not that, it's me. I gotta get my body. They don't say I have to heal. They don't say that. They say, my first goal is to get myself back into homeostasis. When I get back into homeostasis, I'll heal, right? So people are doing the work. They're not doing their meditations to heal. They're doing their meditations to change. And when they change, they heal. So, yes, I mean, I think that everybody has the opportunity then, if they're in the game, to make those kind of changes.
So what you're saying now, if I want to contribute to a less divided world, I need to do the work.
What I'm saying is that every single person is a representation of the whole. You cannot say you want peace and be arguing with your neighbor.
They should be making peace out there.
Exactly.
Well, I hate that they're at war.
Exactly.
Right.
So then show people what greatness looks like. Show people. Show them what love does. And when you get a group of people like this together for 7 days, what we discovered is that 80% of those people, independent of their genotype, and genes make proteins, at the end of 7 days, they're all expressing the same genes and making the same proteins. What does that mean? It means the flock, the herd, the tribe, in unison and behaving the same way. There's an emergent consciousness that comes forth that's reflected in human biology. And the biology says there's antiviral chemicals in the bloodstream that were not there before. There's chemicals that are anti-carcinogenic. That's information that was not in the blood before those 7 days. There's chemicals for neurogenesis. There's endogenous opiates that reduce pain and create euphoria. I mean, there are all kinds, the microbiome is different. There's genes that are for Alzheimer's that are being downregulated. There's enormous amounts of information that's reflected in people's biology when they come together in peace, when they come together in love, when they come together and they break out of the chains of those addictive states. And I really believe that, and the absence of an addiction emotionally is called joy. Because you're no longer tormenting the body. The body can relax and be relieved.
I was just thinking, no wonder we keep coming back.
Well, I don't think it's bad. I mean, like, first of all, every event is always a little different because our research just drives what we're doing a little bit further. But we all get consumed by our environment. And it's so much easier to forget this information than to remember it. And some people have done 6 week-longs. I have no judgment on that. But their life is amazing, and they want to get really good at having mystical experiences. They want to get really good at healing their body a little bit more, or they've healed their body and they want to heal somebody else, or they want community. They want to be with their tribe. Because there's something intangible that happens. We were in this room just in December for a 10-day event, and something emergent happened by around the 6th day, and we saw it in our random event generators. We saw the energy of the room just go off scale, and I felt it. So
I was there. I felt it too.
what was that? What was that?
Really want to ask you this question because of what you're talking about now. The difference. So this is my question. What is the difference between creating these supernatural chemicals within you versus digesting them through something outside of you, like doing plant medicine, for example?
I don't have an opinion on plant medicine or any exogenous substances. I think that if you can alter brain chemistry at times and you can dump a ton more serotonin, or you can produce molecules that fit into serotonin receptors or alter your brain chemistry, and you have a moment to either think greater than how you typically feel, or you're free from the constraints of the neurological networks, the box in your brain that we operate in, long enough to see yourself from a different level of consciousness. I think that it's valuable for a person if the insight changes their behavior. If the insight about whatever it is that they see about themselves or their life or their choices or their past in some way causes them to objectify their subjective self, then I think it's valuable for the person to do something with that. But for the most part, insight never changes behavior. For a lot of people that have done, we work with special ops and Navy SEALs and veterans and Green Berets, and these are people that have had really big traumas, seen some really horrible things, done some really horrible things, and they're severely out of balance. They have severe PTSD, and they've done the plant medicine and stuff, but they can't go outside, they can't be in social settings, they can't connect with their children or their wife. It hasn't been instrumental enough to change their life, right? So when we look at the fMRI studies of brain function that we have during a mystical experience, the brain of the person on the mystical experience looks like they're on psilocybin. To a very large degree, it looks like they've taken a drug. And the subjective story, the self-reported story, is very much like taking some type of exogenous substance. But we're discovering that their nervous system is actually making the same exact chemicals without taking anything. So the experience, though, that's not created by anything outside of us, that full-on sensory experience that a person has is when they're in the mystical moment, when they're in a transcendental state. That experience is creating new circuitry in their brain. They're very conscious. The drug is not altering their consciousness. They're super conscious. And we see that in those high gamma brainwave states. The person is connected. And the brain is actually making its own endogenous substances by upgrading melatonin into certain derivatives that cause them to make their own DMT. And the feeling that comes along with that transcendental experience is not chemical. To a certain degree, there's chemistry that's produced. But from our study of language with our language scientists and specialists, two things happen. The person has a very profound experience where the word feel it or felt it is the most commonly used word. Now, why is that essential? Because a feeling is the end product of an experience. But it's very somatic. It's like they say, every single cell in my body was electric. I felt like my body was filled with light. And it's very somatic. They feel it in their body, like their body's receiving information in that moment, but it's not chemical. The chemistry that's created after that are those chemicals that make them euphoric. In fact, 63 different diseases that we studied that all have a diminishing of pain. One intervention taking away all the pain from 63 different diseases, no drug that does that. The chemistry that's created from that, those endogenous opioids, the dynorphins and the opiates, they're giving the body like an enormous amount of love, a release of energy. So it's somatic in a sense, but it's very, very different feeling than they've ever felt before. The second thing is it's very emotional. Not like, oh, like a love for your puppy, you know, or love for a new scarf or anything like that. It's like a love that is a remembering that they forgot, that's who they are, right? So why is that important to me? Because the person who feels that amount of love stops looking for it out there. They're not going to look for the thing out there that's going to take away their lack or their emptiness. There's a moment of discovery, like a familiar, unfamiliar feeling where you say, I forgot. Oh my God, I forgot. It's within me. That changes the game completely because the person becomes sovereign. Sovereign in a sense is they're less dependent on something out there to take away their emptiness here, right? So I think that when you start, like I just met somebody the other day, just yesterday, was telling me about all these ayahuasca journeys. And, you know, I have nothing wrong with that. I have I don't think it's wrong. But if a person's doing it, they've done 63 ayahuasca sessions and they have cancer, and it hasn't changed their cancer, it's time to try something else. I don't know, like I would say, really, like, don't you want to try something else? You think it's working? So if a person's the veteran or the you know, someone who has PTSD that's been abused, if they're taking the substance to take away their pain, and that it takes away their pain, and they come back to their life and the pain is there the next day or 2 days later or a week later, they're going to say, what made my pain go away? Oh, it was that thing. The moment I notice a change in my internal state, I'm going to pay attention to what caused it in my outer environment. Now we become very dependent on something outside of us to change our internal state. Nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong with that. But sooner or later, you're going to have to step up and change.
Which leads me to my follow-up question. If meditation can be misused as escapism, like with substance addiction, where the drug becomes like an escape from unrest or discomfort, can meditation be used in the same way?
Sure. I think you know, the sponsoring thought behind everything we do gives the meaning behind what we're doing, why we're doing it. So if a person, and this is not a bad thing, I think that, I mean, I've just seen a lot of people in Los Angeles who were subjected to the fires. You know, I mean, they've been displaced, or people who have had trauma, and they need, sometimes you need a break from your outer life, you know, like it's just too much. So it's natural, you know, when the octopus loses a limb, that it hides and it goes into hibernation and it regenerates. You know, there's a process where we have to go inward, you know, a lot of times. I think it's innate in us to do that in a lot of ways. But the person who's overdoing it and the sponsoring thought is, I don't want to face my life, then that's escapism. But what I'm happy about when it comes to this work is that when people do their meditation, say 2 or 3 times a day, and I ask them, by the way, who've healed from some health condition, why were you doing it 2 or 3 times a day? And their answer is always the same. I did it 3 times a day because I stopped believing. There came a moment where I did my meditation, it was 3 hours later, and I started worrying. I started doubting. I started disbelieving, and I started feeling the emotion of fear, and that kept me going back to my diagnosis and what the doctor told me and all the story that goes along with that. I got to change my emotional state. Because if I change my emotional state from fear, instead of surrendering to fear or choosing fear, I'm going to surrender to love and choose love. Well, that sounds really easy theoretically, but this is game on. So when you feel an elevated emotion, you're more prone to believe in that future because you feel connected to it. You feel like it's already happened. So they were doing their meditations 2 or 3 times a day so that they could believe again. And these are people where the chemo wasn't working, the radiation wasn't working, the drug trials didn't work, the surgeries didn't work, the vitamins didn't work, the organic vegan diet didn't work. Nothing was working. So the only thing they had was their belief in themselves. And you cannot have a belief in yourself without a belief in possibility, and vice versa. If you believe in possibility, you got to believe in yourself. So by showing up to reaffirm that belief, sometimes 2 or 3 or 4 times a day, the sponsoring thought behind that is not to escape. The sponsoring thought behind that is they have meaning behind the act. I am doing this to heal. I'm changing my belief, and I have to stay here, and I have to continue to remember to believe this. Believe, behave, become. Yeah.
So which brings me back to the loop I opened, which you won't believe what happened to me. I had a supernatural experience in this room on day 7.
This is holy ground, by the way.
Yeah, you say that. Do you want to elaborate on that? Cancun
Is holy ground because, I mean, people have been made whole over and over again in this room. I've seen hundreds of people out on that beach made whole. It is holy ground.
For me, definitely sacred, holy, whatever you want to call it. It was in this room, day 7. I met my mother. She was not attending the event. She passed away in 1984. So, and in that exact moment when she showed up, it was exactly like you described a moment ago, feeling that level of unconditional love that I've never even heard described before. And I was trying to explain it to someone, and I said, like, it was as if 40 years of trauma was evaporated in that very moment.
First of all, there's more information in the immaterial than there is in the material. Just because you don't have a body doesn't mean you don't exist. 1 out of 3 people, the statistic is 1 out of 3 people have an after-death communication sooner or later in their life with their loved one. And the majority of those people report that when they're with their deceased one in that moment, there's a level of wisdom and a level of love and a level of, like the person has been washed of many of their limitations, and they see them from a different level of consciousness. But the feeling that comes along with the experience means then that experience is literally replacing the memory of the past. And that's how people heal. I mean, I've seen this in scientists that have induced these states, and that's because the emotion from that experience is replacing the emotions that we had of our parents, or many times, again, like when you're working with trauma, a lot of the young kids are in the war and they accidentally shoot their friend because they got startled and they pulled the trigger, and his friends walking in front of them. They suffer for 30 years of their life. They can't get beyond it, and here comes the friend they accidentally shot, and they appear to them and they're like, I'm great. Listen, that was exactly how it was supposed to be. I love you. Get back to loving your family. And that experience replaces the memory, and they're completely changed. And so I believe that changes, that experience should change your paradigm and programming around death. That's what it's for. It's that our, our generations, our parents, our grandparents, all there's a when you do that, when you have that moment, it heals way back generations. So I believe that the feeling that you had from that experience literally washed the past away. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So I believe that those of us, a lot of us who have found your work, we want to contribute to your mission. So, and I just have to use this opportunity to say this. Every time I come to one of your retreats, this is my 7th in total, my 4th in Cancun, I am greeted by the most loving, amazing staff and volunteers.
Thank you for that.
You attract amazing people in your life, obviously. And I've been told by some of the volunteers, because I always spend time talking to them whenever I meet them, some of them have waited for years in order to serve as a volunteer. So my last question for you today would be, how can we be of service, whether of us who have the opportunity to come here or not? How can we pay this work forward? What is the best way for me to help others?
Yeah, thank you for asking the question. I think the world needs you. I think the world needs every single individual. And what I teach in this work is that every individual in this community is a representation of the whole that's evolving to a greater level of consciousness. So I never press people to return back into their lives and say to their husband or to their sister or to their mother, you need to change, you need to get beyond your survival emotions, you need to forgive. I'll never tell them to do that, because that's philosophical. Because the person is going to invariably look at you and find your flaws. They're going to look for something about you and say, she's not that, right? But to contribute to this work is to show up as the very change you would like to see in the world. Show up as the example of truth. Show people what love does. Show them what forgiveness looks like. Show them what greatness is. Show them how to shorten your emotional responses. Show them how present you are, to the point that they're uncomfortable. Like, what is it about this person? I think they will invariably approach you and say, excuse me, you're different than the rest of the herd. Like, you're different than everybody else. What is it about you that's so different? I'm just curious. That's when the door opens for a real conversation, and when the person is ready. And you're not doing any of that for them. You're doing it for you. And we know people change people. We know that mirror neurons emulate behavior. We have very little evidence in this world of a true leadership. And, an emergent consciousness biologically, when you see the flock all moving in the same direction, or the school of fish, there's no leader. We just changed our whole format with the volunteers this event. There's no leader. Everybody leads. Everybody leads. And the person who can't keep up will basically be outstanding. They'll be the bird hitting the window, right? So we demonstrate it for the world, but we're doing it for ourselves. Now, certain people, we have nonprofits for prison projects and, indigenous tribes and veterans and teachers and, children that are in difficult situations. We have nonprofits that help bring this work into communities. We have a nonprofit that works with a lot of the UCSD research and stuff like that. Some people want to be a part of that because they found value and they want to see the research continue. They want this to spread to prisons and wherever. That's another level of involvement. But what I think is what matters the most is the sponsoring thought behind that is mission driven. That in some measure, in some way, what I really want is people who share the same mission, and that is to change enough people, and you can literally change the world.
Thank you for helping me change the world, Dr. Joe.
Thank you
have
so much.
definitely changed my world.
Thank you. Thank you. That's why I do it.